Maybe someone went through something similar. About 3 years ago, I was working in a small office. I became close with the girl across my desk. We'll call her Jane. Jane and I confided in each other about our lives and lended advice when needed, but never hung out outside of work. One day, she got a call about an hour into our shift. She turned white and started shaking. She walked out for a couple of minutes and then she returned. You could tell she'd been crying. I asked her if she was okay, and she said her childhood friend's father committed suicide. He slit his throat. Her friend, we'll call her Sam, found him dead from bleeding out. I didn't know these people, but I felt so terrible for their family. Throughout the week, Jane would talk to me about the drama surrounding this man's death. Around that next Monday is when things started to get weird for me. My husband and I lived in a small apartment. He left for work before me. As I was locking up and about to walk out the door, I got the shivers and a voice in my head told me, "Don't turn around." So obviously, I turned around and standing in the bedroom was an older gentleman with glasses, maybe 5'8", staring at me with a solemn look. I basically noped the fuck out of there and headed to work. I go about my day as usual. Jane was pissed when I got in. She came over to my desk and showed me the man's obituary picture. Can you believe they used this? How inappropriate considering the circumstances. It's like he's saying he did a good job or something. I looked at the picture and it was the old man from this morning, posing with his thumbs up. I lost my breath and managed to get out a, "Wow, yeah, how shitty." When I got home, I plopped into bed and my husband joined me. He falls asleep. I'm scrolling on my phone when all of a sudden he twitches and jolts awake. Concerned, I ask him if he's okay. He doesn't respond right away. He looks at me confused and replies, "Yeah, but there was an old man with glasses that got in my face." Needless to say, I sought counsel and sage and salted the apartment, and my husband and I haven't seen the guy since. I felt kind of bad making him go, but I didn't know what to do. I already knew beforehand Jane didn't believe in that stuff. She still doesn't know to this day. I hope he crossed over or found wherever he was supposed to go. A little backstory. When I was about 9 years old, a young woman moved into the trailer park down the street from my house. She appeared to be in her late teens or early 20s, tall and thin, with long, straight blonde hair and pale skin. We would always see her walking up and down the street, and she always seemed to act a little strange. She scared the daylights out of my parents one night as they were unloading groceries from the car, sneaking up behind them and asking if they needed help, before asking if she could have some of the food. When cars began being broken into and having items stolen, many of the neighbours suspected it was this woman. She always seemed to pop up everywhere. One day, I was out in front of my house playing hopscotch with my sister, who was 3 at the time. My grandmother was inside, keeping an eye on us through the window while she watched TV. She was babysitting while my parents were at work. Anyways, we were playing when I looked up and saw my mom walking down the street towards us. Now, I have to tell you, my mom was in her late 30s, on the shorter side, a little overweight, and had very short, dark brunette hair. I remember this so clearly because I stood staring at her in confusion for a good 10 seconds straight. First I wondered, why isn't Mom at work? Where is the car? What happened? Then I looked harder to make sure it was my mom, and I had no doubt that it was. To confirm this even more, at that moment, my sister interrupted my confusion by yelling, "Mommy!" and started to run toward her. Distracted by this, I moved my gaze away from my mom to look at my sister. She ran about 5 steps before stopping suddenly with her eyes wide. I looked back up at my mom, but this time it didn't look like my mom anymore. It was the young woman from the trailer park who looked absolutely nothing like my mother. She was smiling at us and continued walking our way. My heart felt like it was going to fall out of my body as I grabbed my sister and pulled her inside the house as fast as I could. I thought about telling my grandma, But even as a kid, I knew how crazy it sounded, so I never told her or my parents. The woman stopped coming around shortly after this happened, and everyone assumed she moved away. To this day, it's always bothered me, because I know it was real, and I have no explanation for it. So, I was cleaning my upstairs bedroom when my younger brother came upstairs and said nothing, just went into the bedroom. I call out to him, "Yo, you can take your shower now." He doesn't respond, so I call out again. Still no response. So now, slightly angry that he was ignoring me, I marched in the bedroom and then my heart skipped. He wasn't there. That was when I kinda started freaking out. I ran down the stairs to the dining room and started hysterically rambling to my parents about how my brother had just disappeared. And then they laughed. "Your brother's in the kitchen," my dad said, putting his fork down. "Are you seeing ghosts?" "Maybe our house is haunted," my mum quipped. As soon as she said that, my brother walked past me when I saw he was wearing completely different clothes from the clothes I saw him wearing upstairs. Took a while for me to calm down, and I had insomnia for a while after that. I've been trying to make sense of a recent experience I had, which feels like a ghost story. I use a gambling app for football on my phone. Sunday, I clicked on the app, looked at a specific football game's options, the Philadelphia Eagles versus the Green Bay Packers Sunday night game. When I opened the section for several options lit up and then faded away to the normal button colour. For just a split second, my eyes saw the lit choices and my brain was able to remember 5 different options, although I know more were lit up at that one brief initial moment. I didn't have a long time or any time really at all. It was only a fraction of a second, like a blink really. So I clicked on the 5 options. The selection of the 5 legs in one parlay gave odds of plus 45,000, which means that $450 are won for every $1 played. So I said why not, seeing that the lit up buttons were unusual and I'm typically alert to strange signs and coincidences. The game was a high scoring game and the Eagles won by 7. All of the legs of the bet hit and I won big. The sum is very helpful and I understand I'm very lucky, but I can't make sense of the buttons being lit up. My uncle was a huge Eagles fan. He passed away when I was young. It feels like his presence or something was there. Even watching the game felt strange. All the legs of the bet flowed consistently and by half time I had 3 of the 5 legs of the bet won and just knew that I'd been given something by someone or some presence. Everyone I talk to about it doesn't seem to entertain the experience I know to be true. The bet is so unusual compared to any of my usual bets. My best guess is something supernatural. I now know that there is something beyond our understanding that can influence our physical environment. When I was 18, I went on my first trip alone to Seattle from Montana. I was alone with my dog, and it was a pretty normal trip overall, except we were driving late at night. I was listening to the BBC talk show on AM, and they were talking about some subject I don't remember, but it was spooky, and the radio was super static. We were in the area of I-90 that doesn't have much signal, and pretty much just 100% empty and quiet before the pass. I suddenly got really tired, and my radio wasn't working, so I decided to pull over to sleep. I decided to pull over on a deserted exit with no services before Cle Elum. I believe it was called a 6-mile road or something like that. Anyways, it was extremely dark. I couldn't see anything to my sides or in front of me. There was fog on the road, swirling around just in front of my headlights. There was absolutely nothing around me for a mile, and the road didn't veer off anywhere. After a bit of driving, I pulled up to this huge white and grey warehouse with no windows. There were several white vans and black cars parked around. They looked very expensive for being in the middle of nowhere. The warehouse was locked by a huge barbed wire fence. I backed up my car a bit and decided to park by the trees since it didn't appear that anyone was around. Everything was still dark and silent. There was no wind except for a slight breeze carrying the fog around the cement. I turned my car off completely and wrapped myself up in the blanket. I locked all the doors. I was laying there trying to sleep and looking at the time on my phone. It was 2 a.m. That same moment, my car started to physically shake. My dog started whining and hid behind the passenger chair, obviously distressed. I looked outside my window, but everything was pitch black without my headlights. I couldn't see anything, but my car was shaking back and forth and side to side, like something was grabbing it. I turned it on, freaking out, and backed up. There was still nothing around me at all, except for the strange facility. There were no animals, no people. My car stopped shaking as soon as I backed up. I had this horrible feeling of dread, and that I was being watched, and that I wasn't supposed to be there. I left the area as fast as I could. When I got back to the road, I noticed that my car's time was now 4:30 a.m, and I had a quarter of a tank less gas. I was already getting light out. I don't remember going anywhere, and my phone's time matched the car. There's only 1 hour of time difference between Montana and Washington, so it wasn't that. I still to this day don't know what happened there. I tried looking up the area with my ex on Google Maps a year ago, and I found a weird government facility near Cle Elum with a weird name that may have been the warehouse I went to. I'll have to try and find it again. It definitely feels like something I should not have seen. I've always remembered these experiences from my childhood as the most confusing and scary times growing up. My brother is 3 years younger than me, and this all started happening when he was around 4 or 5. We'll call my brother B. B as a child had health problems and needed a lot of different surgeries. He was in and out of hospital often. The way my mom retells this is that this all started with my brother having horrendous night terrors. So bad, he would sit upright in bed with a blood-curdling scream, thrashing his arms and legs. When B would wake up, he'd have no recollection of his dream, but as time went on, B started to talk to someone at night, and his toy fire trucks would start to light up with the siren going off. My mum would wake up in the morning, and the clocks would all be set to 2:15 a.m. In our house, we had a storage room under the stairs. The storage room was right next to B and I's playroom. B would always say that John and his mom lived in that storage room, and he would go knock on the door and say, "Hi, John's mom. Can John come and play with me and my sister?" I never thought anything of it being a child, and my parents telling me B had an imaginary friend. B would want us to set an extra plate for John at the dinner table, buckle him into the car, etc., and would freak out completely if my parents didn't comply. We had weird things going on in the house. My baby dolls would go off non-stop, to the point that my mom took the batteries out and shoved the dolls in the bottom of the toy box, and one in particular still went off, even without the batteries. We also had this motion sensor Big Bird plushie that constantly went off when nobody was in the room, and the toy would be turned off. This went on for at least a year. My mom said the breaking point was my brother crying in the kitchen, saying he and John got in a fight, with B saying, "I told John we can't be friends anymore because I have bones and he doesn't." That same night, I woke up to a woman calling my name and standing at the side of my bed. When I rolled over and opened my eyes, she immediately asked me, "Where's John?" I didn't reply. She seemed to get upset and asked again, "Where's John?" I again didn't reply and was so scared. I rolled over and closed my eyes. When I rolled back, she was gone. So I booked it into my parents' room, and my mom let me sleep in their bed for the night. The next night, I remember my mom talking to a priest and another strange man. My mom has since told me the priest was to bless the house, and the other man was a medium to help John and his mom cross over. The medium was able to tell my mom that John and his mom passed away in a house fire and was attached to B the last time he had surgery. After the blessing and encounter with the medium, John and his mom were never encountered again. I hope they found their way to the light. When I was approximately 26 years old, I moved into a place all on my own. A tiny little 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment. I was tired of living with roommates and decided I'd live on my own without being bothered by anyone, and happened to find an available apartment across the hall from my best friend's apartment. I knew her place to be pretty haunted. There were several experiences I had there, but figured living in my own apartment, it'd be quiet, as when I walked in, I didn't feel anything weird or off. However, that didn't last long. Soon I'd hear hard footsteps coming from the vacant apartment above, some nights while I'd be getting ready for bed. I'd also heard what sounded like someone rummaging around in my kitchen, causing the plates to clink together, and a plink noise that I would later find to be a bear with a hard nose I'd sat on the countertop in the kitchen. There were also a couple of times where I'd been messed with too. One time, when my sister left to get lunch while I napped, I was pushed roughly into my bed. I could feel the hand against the back of my shoulder pushing me hard into my bed as I lay on my side. Then another time, when I just laid down to bed one night, only to have someone blow in my face. I could even hear the sound of it leaving their mouth and feel my hair sweep away from my face as I laid there. Each time, I'd inspect my entire apartment. All of my windows would be down and locked, and the front door completely locked and secure. It was after these times my cousin, we'll call her C, had asked if she could move in for a little while to share the space. She wanted to move away from her parents' home, and I honestly wanted her good nature and presence to calm my nerves and put me on a good path. For a few days, it seemed like things were better. I wasn't hearing any rummaging in my kitchen, no footsteps above me, and certainly no pushing or blowing in my face. C had already partially moved in and decided she wanted to go out for the evening to spend time with a friend and to grab some remaining boxes from her parents' house. Knowing she wouldn't be home for a while, I decided to lock all the doors on the door and take a long shower, the kind where you let the water take away all the stress of the day. I let her know I'd be locking the locks and to call me, letting me know she was almost home, so I could make sure the deadbolt was unlocked. With her gone, I waved goodbye from the window facing the street where she was parked and hopped in the shower. About 10 to 15 minutes into my shower, I heard the door open and slam shut, as if someone was angry. For some reason, it didn't dawn on me that I'd locked the locks, so I thought to myself, is C angry about something? What happened? I then heard what sounded like someone walking down the hallway, carrying a heavy box. I heard it being placed on the bed in her room, which was directly across the hallway from the bathroom. Someone walked back toward the door, opened it and slammed it shut again. I thought to myself, okay, I guess she's angry about something, so I'll catch her when she comes back, and I'm out. Then the door opens again and slams shut. I hear the sound of her coming back down the hallway and putting another box down and walking back down the hallway. During this time, I was thinking, okay, no, she's angry. Let me catch her before she leaves to find out what in the world is going on. So I rush to get a towel and hear the door slam as I'm quickly drying off and wrapping myself and my hair in a towel. I rush out of the bathroom and run straight to the window in the living room. No C, no car. There's no way she would have driven off that fast, right? So I pick up my phone in the living room and give her a call and ask why she left in such a hurry, slamming the door. She let me know she hadn't been back home since she left and had just made it to her destination. I just said, okay then, I'll get back to you, your friend, and hung up the phone. I then went walking back toward the shower to get back in and noticed wet, muddy boot prints going from the door all the way to the bathroom. They appeared to stop at the bathroom door, like the person just stopped and stood there. In the last set, there was water surrounding the muddy prints. I was baffled. I knew it couldn't have been me. I was as clean as I'd been in the shower for some time and had made sure I dried my body off, wrapped my hair in a towel, and made sure my feet were dry so I wouldn't slip and slide down the hallway. So I looked into C's room just to prove her wrong, because I heard someone walking with boxers. No boxers. Just her cat sitting there looking at me perplexed. So I walked back down the hallway and it dawned on me. I'd locked the doors. As I walked closer to the door, sure enough, all the locks were locked. Even the deadbolt that was able to unlock from the inside. So I made my usual rounds around the apartment, seeing that all the windows were closed and locked too. I've told the story many times to friends and family, and none of us can come up with a reason why there'd be muddy boot prints on the floor. Yes, I was in the shower. However, why would my feet be covered in mud if I'd been in the apartment all day? I'd made sure to stomp and rub them dry with my towel before running out of the bathroom. Also, if it were my cousin coming home, she wouldn't wear boots, nor was it a rainy day. It was a sunshiny bright outside. It had been a few years since this spirit visited me, but last night reminded me of all those horrifying nights as a kid. My paranormal experience seemed insignificant to me as a child, but as I shared them with others, I often got weird looks and concerning comments. These visits occurred pretty often as a kid and teenager, but I'm in my 20s now. Recently, I've been visiting my grandparents down in Florida for the past few nights. My dad and I had to share a room, separate twin beds. He's pretty old and gets up to use the bathroom a lot. I had a very strange and vivid dream, which is very common for me. When I woke up in the middle of the night, I opened my eyes and peeked through the bottom of my eye mask. I saw what I thought to be my father walk from our bedside to the door to use the restroom. But when I lifted the mask to check on him, my father was sound asleep in his bed a few feet from mine. The dream itself was enough to wake me up with the feeling of fear, but the feeling of some sort of presence added to it. This feeling is familiar to me, so I knew it really wasn't anything to be worried about, as nothing actually bad has really happened to me. I turned in my bed to get comfy and go back to sleep, but then my bed started rocking. It felt like someone was manually pushing the side of it, like a shaking you'd get almost on a boat. I'm really not sure how to describe it, other than quite unsettling. It's significant enough to keep me awake, mostly from fear of what the fuck is shaking my bed. I eventually calmed myself down, and the shaking rocked me back to sleep, oddly enough. I woke up this morning recalling all the times this occurrence used to happen in my childhood. I brushed off these events as a kid because, well, nothing ever really came of them. I'd wake up at night and either be rocked back to sleep, or I'd feel someone touching my back, or other times I'd hear their breath. Sometimes I'd wake up so paralysed with fear that I was too scared to move with that presence feeling. It would happen in different locations, beds, houses, and even hotels. So whatever it is, doesn't seem to be attached to the location, but to me, I suppose. I'm not well versed in paranormal events, spirits, ghosts and whatnot, so I figured maybe someone here could have a theory as to what's going on. My running theory is that some dead relative is trying to comfort me. I was adopted from a very bad household situation out of the country, so I'm not in touch with any of my blood relatives. Do spirits follow individual people? Is there someone I could seek that could help identify the spirits and bring some ease of mind to me? Is the overwhelming fear I feel justified? Backstory as far as we know from the house. It was a first home for a couple with no kid. The wife lived into her 50s and the husband lived into his 80s but passed away whilst abroad. No information on their character or reputation as people. So 30 years ago, my parents bought a house that was over 100 years old, detached and a good distance from the next neighbour. Suburban, but also a bit away. Before they moved in the house, the neighbours were having work done, and our house at the time was forgotten and derelict. The builders said to the neighbours they saw their elderly neighbour walking down the garden arm in arm, and it was very sweet. Neighbours were quick to confirm to the builders nobody has lived there for over 14 years, so it couldn't be possible. Mum and Dad move in with my 2 older brothers. Things started to happen. Nothing malicious, more cheeky, i.e. objects around the house would go missing and then reappear in the most bizarre places. Footsteps above, doors shutting, footsteps running up and down the stairs. These are to name a few, and with very minor details attached to them. If you're in the house alone, you hear what could only be described as someone dragging a piano from the attic, dropping it and repeatedly getting louder until you have to leave the house. Anyway, with all this happening, my dad was a solid non-believer at the time. I guess most would say it was sleep paralysis. However, this happened a few nights in a row, and my dad would see an elderly gentleman with loads of crates in his face standing at the end of his bed. My mum loves the DNA history stuff and found out the husband who lived here before he passed away abroad and had acne very badly, causing severe scarring in his face. Anyway, trying to cut a huge story very short, this stuff happened until my mum and dad divorced. Dad stayed in the house and extended it, and things stopped happening so much, and then gradually nothing. Fast forward 15 years later, I now live here along with my 2 older brothers and their own families. 4 months ago, I was home alone, and my bedroom is situated downstairs, opposite the stairs. I heard someone running up and down the stairs, constantly, about 5 times, but the last time never coming back down. Reminder, everyone was not in the country, so it's not possible to be a family member. Since then, everyone is experiencing the slamming of doors, the dragging sounds, and large footsteps. We had my sister-in-law's brother stay over during Christmas. Now the house is open plan, and we don't want to be spooking him, so we didn't tell him about the recent creepy noises. For the 2 nights he stayed, he told us the first night he had dragged and loaded footsteps above him, and the second, someone was going up and down the stairs so much he had to check if it was one of us. So in all, there were around 7 of us living here, and everyone is hearing these dragging and awful sounds, from family to guests. I've heard thuds, and truth be told, to a believer. But I don't understand why I'm not hearing the dragging noises, but my family are. And also why this started again after so many years of nothing. Is it bad? Is it good? My boyfriend, my dog and I just moved cross-country into a very old town with a dark history. We're renting a home, and since day one, I've always felt uneasy about the basement. My dog has had extremely abnormal behaviour whenever going into the basement as well. While staring into the room that makes my hair stand up, he began urinating before running up the stairs and refusing to come down for several days. Anytime I have to go down, it's a sickening feeling and an overwhelming fight or flight response. I've seen a tall shadow multiple times, doors in the basement opening and slamming, and so much more. Where do I go from here? I'm uncomfortable being in my own home. I'd love to know the history of the house if there's anything, but I don't know where to start. Any advice? Welcome. About a month ago, my friend came over to my house to hang out. There were 5 of us. It was about 7 p.m, so we decided to go to this playground up the street from my house. While we were there, we decided that we should go to our old elementary school playground and get frozen yogurt. After we got frozen yogurt and were driving there, we were talking about our elementary school's nature walk and how we should go and walk through it again. My friend parked in the back of the school and we got out. We were walking around the school, just remembering old memories of us running around the field. And I finally said I didn't think it was a good idea of us for us to walk on the nature walk because it was getting dark. They all agreed, and we walked from the back to the school at the front. There were 2 people on the swings when we got there, but they left shortly after, and 2 other people came with their mom. My friends and I were just having fun. After the mom left with the 2 girls, we stayed for about 20 more minutes, until it was almost too dark. When we were walking to my friend's car, we were talking about something inappropriate. I got a weird vibe and chill walking back behind the school, but I ignored it. Something happened where my friends were kind of arguing about what we were talking about, because it was inappropriate to talk about it at an elementary school. All of a sudden, in the corner of my eye, I saw a light, and I stopped everyone and said, "Did I just see that?" We heard a door swing open, and we sprinted to the car. All of us jumped in. My friend locked the doors and zoomed out of there so fast, and as we drove back to my house, we were all like, "What the fuck just happened?" No one was at the school at all. That scared all of us, and we don't know what happened, but we all agreed that we had a bad vibe walking back. I suppose mine isn't as creepy per se as many of these paranormal experiences, but throughout my life, I've had situations where in seemingly mundane conditions, I'll suddenly have a memory or message telling me to do or avoid an extremely specific thing. I've had deja vu experiences before, but this was always slightly different. Once, when I was 14 or so, I was standing in the kitchen drinking water or something, when all of a sudden I had an almost sudden urge to put my water down and begin aimlessly searching through our medicine cabinet. It was as if someone had been doing what I was doing before and came back to tell me to do something specific. Almost invariably, after seconds, my parents would suddenly come home or show up quietly and run into me, and I'd be completely unaware of their presence or arrival beforehand. Originally, I just chalked it up to me having some sort of guilty conscience and trying to get out of trouble. But it's happened in many situations across my life, even if there was no danger or risk of getting in trouble at present. Sometimes I'd be lying in bed late at night, when suddenly I'd feel a quick sense of immense worry, and feel practically told to get up and pick up something lying in my room, or just stand there menacingly for no reason. Nothing would happen, and eventually the feeling would subside, and I'd go back to bed. But this odd surge kept happening throughout my life, and sometimes even got me out of trouble growing up. Because 60% of the time, I got instructions someone would enter soon after. So I always felt it was a net positive. It varied in its specificity of instructions too. Sometimes it would just say to drop what I was currently doing and vacate the room as fast as possible. While other times it would give me guided instructions on doing something seemingly random that never amounted to anything. I've never really mentioned it to anyone simply because of how hard it would be to explain. And I didn't want people to think I was insane or anything, since even I obviously realise it sounds really odd. But it occurs anywhere between once every year to once every couple months, so I can't really forget about it. I'll preface this by saying I'm a secular person. No belief in those ethereal and religious things. But I still think about this. It still gives me pause. I was a host for the dinners at a Victorian manor, Larnock's Castle. Guests would come and stay in the lodgings, and they'd come to dinner in the old dining room itself. A real treat for those who've travelled so far. Most nights, my job was to entertain and serve the people staying on the grounds. The dining room would seat 14 at a table. Not many, really. So if there were ever more, then we'd extend to another room, the music room. We'd set up 4 large trestle tables, push them together and place them over a large, elegant tablecloth to make it appear as one large banquet table. Now listen, the castle is large, cold, creaky and old. Everything moves and shifts. Pipes rattle, floorboards squeak. But this room, the music room, something about it was off. I can't quite describe the feeling. Even in the daytime, the room felt oppressive, heavy. It was a large room, where you'd enter through a small dark passage, tall windows which never seemed to let in the sun, A fire which never quite warmed the space. The only thing that seemed to liven the room was the guests or anyone who played the very old piano. A good night of hearty conversation, laughter and dancing would have set the tone most times. People could enjoy themselves and tell stories of their travels, punctuated by a wash of beer and wine. Even in quiet times, there was an air of civility, respect for the place and its history. But empty, before and after, there was something about it. Sometimes tourists would not enter. They stood outside looking in, and when asked, they'd either say they'd rather not enter, or say nothing at all. At first, I didn't exactly see why. I'd spent many nights going all the way to the top of the castle, entering each room and pulling the cord for the lights and closing doors. Always just before midnight, up the stairs to the top floor, working my way down. I was always asked to do this as it never felt scary or frightening to me. But for some reason, whenever asked and even before I knew, was it my job to open the curtains in the music room, I always felt unsettled. I would keep my face down, turn to the side. I firmly refused to see my reflection in the window. Something in my mind told me I shouldn't. I eventually discovered that I could liven the room through music. Of course, each dinner we had, we'd play music from a crappy plastic CD player, some drivel from the Victorian era, which no one but staff had heard a million times. But there was also the piano. I was bold enough to play some nights. I knew a few era pieces. The guests would applaud. I'd take a small bow and get back to service. Sometimes, though, I was too tired or I was simply too busy. But this is where I think I made my mistake. The first time, I guess, I didn't really notice. A shadow in the corner of your eye is easy to dismiss. And a light in a room turning back on is surely faulty wiring. A little shadow moving under the door is your mind playing tricks. When those off nights began to be frequent, my staff would say they weren't quite feeling it. The guests were quiet. The room felt cold. And after the guests left, the empty room even seemed a different colour. No one wanted to clear it, not for the tables, the chairs, or even the tablecloth. I remember the first time that things felt wrong, and I mean truly wrong. It had been a rough night. It was me and one other waiter. The guests had left. We'd basically done all we needed to do, so I sent her home. The chef had left some time after dessert, just me left in the building. I ascended the stairs to turn off the lights, replaying the night in my head to figure out what went wrong. It seemed a perfectly calm night to me, so what gives? I switched off every light in every other room in the building, made my way down to the music room. I looked in. I couldn't bring myself to enter. I knew I had to go in, but I couldn't. I left the tables set up in the morning crew. When I left the castle, I looked back. I saw the parlour light at the very top of the castle was back on. I huffed, but I went all the way back up, frustrated, to switch it off again. I ensured this time the switch was off. I leave again. I head to the car. I look back. The light is on. I leave it this time. In the window, I think I see something moving. I'll not go back this time. It's a while before the next instance of this sort of thing. A night manager started staying behind late to help pack down. This one night, it had been long. Thankfully, the chef had made up some food for us halfway, else we'd have been exhausted. I hadn't played the piano that night. I simply wanted to go home. I had dismissed my waitstaff. I'd turned off every light upstairs. It was just me and the night manager. I moved chairs from the music room to storage. I kept it up, 2 at a time, as quickly as I could. I wanted to be done. I saw the manager washing dishes in the kitchen as I walked past each time, steadily working away, clattering and splashing in the sink. Great, I thought. We'll be out of here in no time. I've got the last 2 chairs from the head of the room, just the tables on the tablecloth, which were still neatly arranged in the room. I stack the 2 chairs in storage, make my way back as slow as I approach the music room. From the entrance, I can see the corner of the tablecloth is folded over, halfway over the bottom corner of the table. I can still hear the manager in the kitchen. I had just seen her as I walked past. Absolutely no time for someone of her age to have moved that far that quickly. I approached the table slowly. I knew it could only have been myself that had done this, but it was folded over in such a way that I surely would have remembered doing so. It seemed intentional, as if moved in preparation to be folded. I set my hands down on the table, simply confused. I felt this immense weight. Suddenly, I couldn't move. I felt a sharp, cold move through my body as I was forced closer and closer to the table. I panicked. I yelled, "Get off!" But I didn't know why. I managed to thrust myself sideways using my arms and walked swiftly back to the kitchen, just around the corner. I looked to the night manager and simply said, "I think we should go." She looked at me, then she looked past me and replied, "Yes, I think we should." I didn't turn around. We literally stopped exactly what we were doing and simply left. We walked to the car park across the lawn. I didn't look back until I was in the car. I didn't want to believe it. I still don't, but it still makes me feel sick. The parlour light was on. There was someone in the window. I didn't stay there much longer. I decided to leave a few weeks after that, actually. And if it was a busy night, I gave the music room guests to my waiters. I didn't go back in at all after that night. It's been just over a decade since I worked there. I visited in autumn this year, though. I stepped into that room. I gave the old piano keys a few chords from Chopin, and somehow it felt right. But I cannot forget that feeling from that one night. My eyes well up, retelling it now. It doesn't even seem that wild, but that awful weight. I don't think I'll ever return again. When I was like 15, I moved into my sister's old room and soon heard something crawling in the attic above me. I told my mom, and she never believed me until one day she was in my room and heard it as well. My stepdad crawled in the attic several times since then, and he said he never saw any rats or droppings or any sign of anything up there. I also recently spoke with him, and he assured me the attic is sealed off, so nothing can even get in there. It's been 17 years, and I still hear something crawling up there whenever I'm in this house. I've never thought of it being a gnome until recently because I am kind of obsessed with seeing one. I believe one actually randomly removed a stain from my clothes several months ago. My overalls were sitting on a chair for a few days, and I remembered the stain. I went to check, and it's gone. I swear. It was on the chair drying instead of going into the dryer because I didn't want the stain to cook into the fabric. Thought I would try to remove it later. A few days later, nothing. I left offerings from time to time, so maybe they're throwing me a bone. Last week, my friend and I were laying on his mat on the floor. We hear some sort of drum roll within the mat or below, as if someone was tapping it with their fingers. I asked, "Do you hear that?" He's just like, "Yep." I'm like, "What the fuck?" And right then, something crashes into something right outside the window. The drumming stopped. It was so weird. My stepdad again confirmed the only thing beneath us is concrete, so he's starting to wonder as well. I got home the other day, and right in the entryway is a canvas painting on the wall. For some reason, I saw a blue orb shine through the canvas. I thought, that's odd. Is there a device behind here? Nope, there wasn't. And I'm starting to hear knocks right around that wall now, too. To set the scene, I was living with my mother as well as two brothers, me being the youngest. And I live in Australia, where there is a belief that if you mistreat children, they'll be visited by the Featherfoot. Okay, so I was young, and don't really remember much from that time, because unfortunately, I have repressed a lot of memories. We had no father around, and mum was either intoxicated or UTI, so she always had lots of guys coming over to visit at any hour. On this particular day, I don't remember many details. All I know is that my grandmother and grandfather dropped me off at Mum's house after going ice skating. I was sore from falling over a lot and exhausted from the trip. So I walk inside my front glass sliding door into the lounge, where I announce my arrival, to no response. I shrug my shoulders and lay down on the couch with my chocolate milk and basically pass right out after turning the TV on. I wake up almost as if I was struck by lightning, because I'm like sitting up before I even realise I'm awake, heart pounding and drenched in sweat. I take a few breaths and feel like I've been running for the whole time I was sleeping. I rub my eyes and can hear my TV playing the Men in Black theme song. I remember giggling at the weird worm aliens in the video. I watched for a little while longer than I stood, and started running to go to the kitchen when I was stood frozen. Standing around 5 feet behind the glass door, looking right into my eyes, there was an almost 7-foot figure standing in my front yard. Not moving an inch, still staring right in my eyes, I yell, "Mum's not here right now, so fuck off," thinking, or hoping, maybe it was one of her friends. I felt cold and shivers ran up my spine as the car drove down the street, lighting up the humanoid. I could see he had wings like an angel, 4 of them shining and reflecting the light of the car, and was covered in pitch black feathers. It was at this point my heart sank. I fell to my knees and just started bawling my eyes out. I cried for what felt like hours, wiping the tears from each eye separately, never taking my eyes off it until it was swallowed by the dark of night. Sliding back until I was flush against the wall, I just sat there staring at the darkness behind the glass door until my family came back. Now that I think back on it, I don't know why I started crying. Inside I just felt a sadness so heartbreaking, I can't even explain it. I've never seen it again. Also, it's the only paranormal experience I've had. To give some background on the house and the story and people who lived in it, my significant other and I have the opportunity to buy his grandmother's house. This said grandmother is a wonderful, extremely religious woman who is sadly in a nursing home until she passes due to dementia. This woman has lived in a house for 70 years, 50 or so being alone as her husband passed that long ago. She never remarried or dated. Her house is being offered to family members first, before going on the market. The house looks like it was from the 1950s, as nothing inside seems to have changed. Wallpaper, carpets, doors, windows. My significant other and I went to visit the house Saturday night because it was the only spare time we both had to really look into the house. The family is giving him 1 week to decide. We parked in the driveway to see a light on in the living room. We thought someone may be in the house, but turns out it was a light that stays on to look like someone is home. We got inside and my significant other stated some things, like posters, have been moved to a living room from a bedroom, which seemed odd to him. However, the family does have access to the house, and a healthy person comes to the house for paperwork. I've been in this house a few times before to visit his grandmother and felt fine with the environment. When I stepped into the house, my chest instantly tightened, like fight or flight tightening. That had never happened to me before. Well, we went through the house that needs a lot of work. The last room we looked at was his grandmother's room. We then left the room to go down the stairs and leave the house. There's a small side table at the entryway to the bedroom. I don't know if my significant other accidentally hit the table while leaving the room, but a picture fell. I was still in the room and made a joke it was an omen. My significant other bent down to pick up the picture that fell onto the table. He picked it up and looked at it, an old-style trifold frame of Mary holding Jesus. Now, I'm not religious at all, nor do I know a lot about biblical references, but I know when something seems off. The feeling I had from the beginning and then that picture falling just made me extremely uncomfortable. This happened about 10 years ago. I was 19 at the time. A little context, I had moved from my parents' house at the age of 17 for college. My dad passed away a year later, and my mum got really depressed. So me and one of my older sisters decided to move back in with her to keep her company and help the best way we could. On that particular weekend, my mom went on a trip with my aunts, and it was just me and my sister in the house. From a kid, I never liked my parents' room. It had a weird vibe, but I decided to sleep at my mom's room because of the TV. The story has two versions, mine and my sister's. I'll start with mine. I fell asleep watching movies. The bathroom door is in front of the bedroom door I slept in. In the early hours, 4 or 5 a.m, I woke up to a tall figure standing in the hallway between the two doors. I thought it was my sister. She's very tall and a sleepwalker, so I called her name. When I did, the thing just ran and jumped at me, held me down. During the attack, I thought it was a real person, like a burglar or something. It was on top of me, held one of my arms up, and with the other arm, it shut my mouth and held my arm with its elbow. All I could see was the eyes, big blue eyes, beautiful even. No face, just this dark figure with eyes. I struggled, and for a second, took its hand from my mouth, so I screamed at the top of my lungs. My sister woke up and ran to my room. The thing jumped from me, and I saw it go past my sister through the door. I screamed for her to catch it, to run and shut the back door of the house, and she just stood there saying, "What? Where? There's no one there. You're dreaming, wake up." The neighbour showed up at our gate, calling my mom, because he woke with my scream. And that was it. Nobody saw anything, just me. And the only proof I had was a purple bruise on my arm, where its elbow was holding me down. My sister says that when she got to the room, I was laying down looking at the ceiling. My memory is different. I was sitting up on the bed. I think a ghost is messing with me. Can they do that? It's almost comical, but I'm starting to think I'm cracking up. A few years ago, I discovered my mum's wedding rings went missing. Tore the house apart. Found some empty jewellery boxes in the guest room closet, which was strange. I eventually gave up looking and assumed they were stolen by a cleaning lady or something. A year later, I went out to dinner and pulled out a small jewellery box to put on some earrings. Wore the earrings, came home to find the missing wedding rings placed in a tiny box. Weird, eh? After that, nothing too strange happened until now. I was staging the house to sell, so I had to move all my office equipment into the garage. So I boxed up my keyboard and mouse, etc. After the move, I was setting up my new office. Mouse was missing. Searched everywhere, unpacked every box. Weeks go by, and I just give up and go and buy a new one. A few weeks after that, I stop at the car wash and clean. Vacuum and scrub the leather seats. The car is clean, y'all. I go home, park the car, do normal TV things and go to bed. The next morning, I leave to get breakfast, and the stupid missing mouse is sitting there, right in the middle of the seat in the car, in my locked garage. Like, what? Last week, I was working all day at home, as I do every day. Left the house for 2 hours, and when I returned, several home kitchen drawers were wide open. Empty drawers. Nothing is missing. Not even from the one right next to them with cash and credit cards in it. Why would a ghost steal a stupid Apple mouse and return it 3 months later? Why would a person for that matter? I've now changed all the locks and reset every code and set up cameras like a crazy person. Human or non-human entity? I guess I'll figure it out eventually.